Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call to order the County Planning Commission for October 7th, 2024. Will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioners Borja,
Here.
Conklin,
Here.
Corona Sabignano, Devlin,
Here.
and Rathel.
Here.
And you do have a quorum.
If you'll please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with our non-contested portion of the agenda this evening. Will you please call item number 1?
Yes, and can I read? I'm going to read the county's announcement really quickly here.
fair enough.
So that's okay. The county fosters public engagement during the meeting and encourages public participation, civility, and use of courteous language. The commission does not condone use of profanity, vulgar language, gestures, or other inappropriate behavior, including personal attacks or threats directed towards any meeting participant. Seating may be limited and available on a first-come, first-served basis. To make an in-person public comment, please complete and submit a speaker request form to the clerk. Each individual will be invited to the podium to make a comment. Members of the public may send a written comment, which is distributed to commission members and filed in the record. Contact information is optional and should include the meeting date and agenda or off-agenda item number to be sent as follows. Email a comment to boardclerk@saccounty.gov or mail a comment to 700 H Street, Suite 2450, Sacramento, California, 95814. And by your leave, Chair Rathel, and Commissioners, item number 1 this evening is, I apologize here. So it is PLNP 2023-00216 for a conditional use permit and design review. And it is located at 4554 Auburn Boulevard, approximately 240 feet southwest of the intersection of Pasadena Avenue and Auburn Boulevard in the Carmichael Old Foothill Farms community. And the environmental document is a notice of exemption.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Todd Smith, Planning Director. This item is a non-contested item. Staff is available and ready should you desire a presentation. It's up to you.
Thank you so much. I'll look to the commissioners. Any request for a presentation or staff questions this evening?
No, and I would like to move the agenda item when appropriate.
Perfect.
I'd go ahead and second that.
All right, we'll check in on public comment real quick.
And there's no public comment on this item.
Excellent.
And I apologize. Who made the second? That was Devlin.
Commissioner
Thank
Devlin.
you.
I do want to give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission if they would so choose. Not necessary, but if the applicant's here. All right. The applicant has chosen not to address the commission, so we have a motion for staff recommendation and a second. Please call the roll.
Okay. Commissioners Borja,
Yes.
Conklin,
Yes.
Devlin,
Aye.
and Rathel.
Yes.
And the motion carries with those members present.
Thank you. Please call item number 2.
Okay, so your item number 2 is PLNP 2023-00110, and it's for a development plan review and design review, and it's located at 7430 Reese Road in the South Sacramento community, and the environmental document is a notice of exemption.
Good evening, Commissioners. Leanne Mueller. Staff is also available and ready for a presentation as this is a non-contested item. We would note that before the hearing, you were handed out a revised set of findings and conditions in which we added a finding 4 to the attachment 2. So in any motion you make, we would recommend that you reference that set.
Thank you, Leanne. Any questions for staff this evening, or would anyone like to see a presentation on this item? All right, seeing none. Any public comment this evening on item number 2?
No public comments on the item.
All right, at this time, I would ask if the applicant's here and would like to address the commission. Okay, applicant's going to decline to address the commission. I will entertain a motion.
I would go ahead and move the staff recommendation.
With the inclusion of development plan review condition 4 added?
Yes, thank you.
Finding 4.
Finding 4.
Yes.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Okay, Commissioners Borja,
Yes.
Conklin,
Yes.
Devlin,
Aye.
And Raythel.
Yes.
And the motion carries with those members present.
Thank you. That moves us to the contested portion of the agenda this evening. Please call item number 3.
So your item number 3 this evening is PLNP 2022-00220. It's for a use permit, special development permit, tentative parcel map and design review, and it's located at 8695 Greenback Lane at the northwest corner of Hickory Avenue and Greenback Lane in the Orangevale community. And the environmental document is a mitigated negative declaration.
Leave the presentation for the previous item still on.
There we go.
Thank you, Lydia.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Irving Huerta, Assistant Planner and Project Manager for the Greenback and Hickory project. Go ahead and get started with a brief presentation. So the project site is located at 8695 Greenback Lane. The site is situated on the northwest corner of Hickory Avenue and Greenback Lane within the Orangevale community. The project site is currently vacant. The project site is located within the Greenback Lane Special Planning Area, and it's within the light commercial subzone. Surrounding land uses include single-family residential to the north, a grocery store to the east, a gas station over to the south, and a congregate care senior living facility to the west. I do want to note that the site is identified within the housing element vacant land inventory for approximately 26 lower income category units. The proposed development of the subject parcel would not result in the development of those 26 units for the lower income category. However, it was determined that there are sufficient remaining sites identified in the housing element inventory for the lower income category in order to adequately meet the county's remaining RHNA sites. So back in April of 2018, the board did approve a zoning ordinance amendment to modify the permitted uses of the subject property from business professionals' office uses over to uses permitted in the light commercial zoning district. This amendment allowed most of the uses permitted in the light commercial zoning district, including the automobile service use and mini storage uses. There was one code violation cited for the subject site for overgrown vegetation last year in 2023. However, that violation has been remedied and closed. So the entitlement request consists of the following: a tentative parcel map to divide a 2.84 gross acre parcel into 2 new parcels in the Greenback Lane Special Planning Area, a use permit to allow an auto service station, more commonly referred to as a gas station, as well as a neighborhood convenience store with extended hours, that being 24/7, within the Greenback Lane SPA, as well as for the proposed gas station fuel canopies to deviate from the following development standards. That is the design clearance height, as well as the allowable roof structure height. The request also includes a special development permit, and that is to allow for the proposed project to deviate from the following development standards: the minimum front yard, the minimum side street yard, as well as one of the landscaping planner required. The entitlement also includes a design review, and that is in order to determine substantial compliance with the county-wide design guidelines. So an environmental document was prepared for the project, and it was an initial study mitigated negative declaration. The document was released, for public review on September 9th, 2024. As listed over here on the screen, there were several impacts discussed. though the document did conclude that the project would result in less than significant impact with the implementation of mitigation measures. Please note that there has been updated language pertaining to the greenhouse gas emission mitigation measure. That's mitigation measure F and condition of approval 33. And that clarifies the project's proposed use of natural gas. And that language does not change the project, obligations, or the process that's been previously discussed. This measure clarifies that the reporting would be required in order to demonstrate compliance with the mitigation measure if the project is implemented using natural gas infrastructure. So moving on to the next couple of slides, I'm going to go over just several of the project exhibits and walk you through them. The first one is the tentative parcel map. So as you can see, or as mentioned previously, the vacant property is currently proposed to be divided into 2 new commercial parcels. Proposed parcel 1 is over here, this corner lot over here. That's where the proposed gas station and convenience store will be located, and the approximate acreage proposed will be 1.33. And then proposed parcel 2 is where the proposed mini storage facility will be located. So it's this parcel over here. And that one will just be over 1.5 acres in size. Both parcels will be required to connect to public water and public sewer. So this is an overview of the project site, again, as proposed, with both the mini storage facility and the convenience store with gas station. A couple of points to point out. So access-wise, parcel 1 over here, that one's going to be accessed either via Hickory Avenue or Greenback Lane over here. And the pointer's a bit difficult to move, but these are the 2 driveway entrances, which will give the site access. And then parcel 2 over here will be getting access along an existing access easement, just over here. This is actually the orientation right now. It's a bit off-sided, but this side over here, where this easement is actually facing north. So that's where the mini storage facility will be accessed. There is also cross-access as well proposed, and that's over here with this new access road. So this will connect both parcels, again, over here from this existing access easement over here, and eventually merge with the driveway over here along Greenback. Improvement-wise, we also do have various easements dedications as well as street improvements that are going to be required along both Hickory and Greenback Lane. And then also we do have a requirement where a masonry wall will be required, and that is going to be over here on the western side of the property. In order to meet that requirement, the western side of the property, the applicant is proposing to grade and expose an existing masonry retaining wall anywhere between 6 to 8 feet in height. And currently that wall divides the subject property on the western side. Staff has incorporated, however, a condition of approval regarding the masonry wall requirement. I'll go into more detail later in my presentation. We also do have a requirement over here for the masonry wall on the northern side of the property. However, on that side, there is an existing wall that is already there. Some portion of the property line doesn't have the wall, as it's located right on the driveway entrance of that access easement, as I mentioned earlier. And essentially building a wall up to the property, or the driveway entrance would, in a sense, pose a safety and visibility issue for those using that access road. So this is an elevation of the proposed convenience store when facing directly at the entrance of the store. So it's going to be ancillary to the gas station, and it's going to be operating under the AM/PM name. The convenience store building will be approximately 2,900 square feet in size. And then due to the project's location within the Greenback Lane SPA, the convenience store is incorporating town and country architectural elements. So that's over here, such as some stone veneer over here on the sides right here of the building. And then we also do have some hip roofs over here on this side of the building as well as over here. And then we also do have beige light colors as well, as you can see. So this is an overview of the gas station canopy structure. So again, the gas station is going to be operating under the name Arco, and they will have approximately 6 multiple product dispensers just located underneath the canopy structures themselves. Those product dispensers are going to be serving up to 12 automobiles at any time. And then going back to the use permit request, there is a request to have the fuel canopy deviate again from the design clearance height. The maximum allowable height is 16 feet. And currently, as proposed, the design clearance height is just 16 and a half feet. The other requirement is the allowable roof structure height. That requirement is that the roof structure shall not extend higher than 2.5 feet in size. And the proposed canopy structure is going to be approximately 3 feet and 4 inches. So the applicant has mentioned that the intention of deviating from these standards is to allow for the canopy to meet the architectural requirements under the SPA. So this is an overview of the mini storage, I should say elevations of the mini storage. So the mini storage facility is a proposed indoor climate control facility. It's going to be consisting of 2 levels, and that will also include a basement underneath those 2 floors. And as you can see, it is designed to resemble a red barn. To provide additional privacy to the adjacent care facility residents, as well as to the neighbors just north of the site, the building will have faux windows around the exterior of the building. And you can see those windows over here, depicted over here on the southern part of this slide, right over here. So these are all windows, or 4 windows, I should say. Operations-wise, patrons who visit the facility will be able to do so at any time of the day, as patrons will be able to access the building through security codes. This is an overview of the landscape plan. So as you can see, new landscaping is proposed along the perimeter of the site, around the convenience and mini storage buildings, as well as the parking areas. So along the Hickory Avenue site, the landscape planner will be composed of a mix of California natives for water retention purposes, vines, grasses, and small evergreen shrubs for streetscape screening purposes, as well as some ground covers along the perimeter of the mini storage facility. And that portion, just to be specific, is being depicted over here on this part. So it's the new landscaping that I was mentioning. One thing to point out as well is that there is an existing live oak tree that will be retained, and that's over here depicted in this kind of like shadow silhouette right here. So that's the oak tree that's being preserved. So moving over here to the Greenback Lane portion, so this side right here, this frontage, a variety of ground covers and street trees will be located along that perimeter planter, and as well as along the parking lot planters as depicted over here. So moving on to the, again, wanted to touch base on the special development permit request, specifically for the landscape planner adjacent to residential uses. It is required that a minimum 7-foot wide continuous landscape planner is required for commercial uses along property lines shared with either an ag residential or a residential zone. So that's this planter over here that's being depicted just right around here. And I apologize with the pointer, a little difficult to move around. Currently, as proposed, the planter does begin as a 7-foot wide planter near the driveway entrance of the gas station along Greenback Lane. However, it does eventually reduce over to a 4.5-foot wide planter for the remainder of the project site. So that planter will be composed of small evergreen shrubs and will not really have much ornamental trees. I believe there's just like 1 or 2 shown over here depicted. But for the most part, no trees or no large landscape planter as proposed. So the Orangeville Community Planning Advisory Council met back in May of this year, and where a motion to recommend the board approve the requested entitlements actually failed. That vote was 2 yes, 4 no. Therefore, the CPAC recommends that the board deny the requested entitlements. Some of the concerns that the CPAC had regarding the requested entitlement package was regarding the proposed setbacks, compatibility of the project, dense nature of the project, over-concentration of gas stations in the area, as well as proposed alcohol sales. There was also a total of 5 public comments. The main concerns brought forward were regarding increased traffic and noise. There was also other concerns over the western access driveway being used as a shortcut, the landscaper planner deviation, health risks associated with the gas station, safety concerns regarding the proposed alcohol sales, the lack of meandering sidewalks as required by the Greenback Lane SPA, as well as also the overconcentration of gas stations in the area. The Design Review Advisory Committee did meet back as well in May of this year, and they recommend that the board find the project in substantial compliance with the design guidelines. So the project, moving forward with project analysis, the project is consistent with the general plan, community plan, and zoning code as conditioned. The remaining sites identified in the housing element affordable housing inventory are still adequate to meet the county's remaining lower income RHNA for the planning period. The project is compatible with the surrounding zoning and land uses. There are no significant environmental concerns. It was found consistent with the design guidelines by the DRAC. While the project was not supported by the Orangeville CPAC, the project would be establishing a new active use or new active uses, as well as the installation of street improvements, providing a safer environment, as well as various modes of transportation. One of the key conditions in this project is, again, kind of going back to that masonry wall, is condition 11. And that condition is pertaining, again, to the requirement of the wall and how the existing retaining wall may satisfy the requirement, as the applicant intends to grade and expose the wall in order to meet the height requirements, as well as the wall requirements. However, that condition additionally does state that if the wall were to be removed, the applicant would be subject to construct a new wall in order to meet height and design requirements, and that would be also subject to an incidental design review. Planning and Environmental Review staffs recommends that the Planning Commission make the following recommendations to the board. Determine that the environmental analysis prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act is adequate and complete with the proposed modifications outlined in the memo provided. Adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. Approve the use permit subject to findings and conditions. Approve the special development permit subject to findings and conditions. Approve the tentative parcel map subject to findings and conditions. And lastly, find the project in substantial compliance with the design guidelines, subject to findings and conditions. This concludes the end of my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. Additionally, we also do have the applicant team present as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Questions for staff this evening?
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that. Had a couple questions. I was hoping you might be able to provide a little clarity. As I understand it, the Greenback Lane SBA requires some sidewalks or I think in the analysis there was a reference to meandering sidewalks. Can you provide how the project is either consistent with those requirements or not?
Yeah, so regarding the meandering sidewalks, it's my understanding that Department of Transportation has been moving away from the meandering sidewalks and has been kind of doing just the regular sidewalks as depicted in the site plan. And it's my understanding that has been done more recently for public safety, so for pedestrian safety.
Okay. And then there's been several comments made about this rear access driveway that parallels to Hickory Avenue as a potential shortcut from executing that presumably right-hand turn at the Greenback Lane light. I would imagine during commuting hours and so forth, that might be very tempting. And what have we seen? I mean, as I understand it, there's been, in addition to the comments, I believe the applicant clarified that there wouldn't be, they would try to eliminate it if they could. And I'm just, this obviously isn't the first time we've seen these with projects. Are there mitigating, issues or barriers or temporary barriers, or what have we seen in other projects that we might be able to utilize or consider here to eliminate some of these concerns?
Yeah, so not too familiar with perhaps probably other project examples, but in the instance of this project site, that access easement is currently existing. It is located within the applicant's project site. That access easement between both of the parcels, it's my understanding that that was based off of a requirement of having fire being able to access the mini storage facility. I think another thing to point out as well that the applicant had brought forward in the past is that a lot of the traffic that would be entering the site would be coming in from Greenback Lane, so entering and exiting the gas station facility. They assume that a lot of the traffic won't be going into the mini storage facility, as only patrons that are associated with that facility would be accessing it. Another point that I wanted to add as well, it's my understanding that in the future, there may be the addition of security fencing along that mini storage site, and that, again, will be utilized for patrons to visit the site and visit the facility when doing so.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate having a better understanding of allowing fire and first responders to be able to respond to that rear area by the storage facility. Could you speak a little bit about the comments as it relates to a lack of trees along the western side of landscaping planner? I saw in the rendition of the landscaping that there was kind of a very minimal or dearth amount of landscaping or trees and shrubs and so forth, and explain why we're not requiring the standard size, fully planted or fully planter-sized requirements.
Yeah, so going back to that access easement that's present along that western side, given that fire, again, would need that in order for fire access, they would need to have it at a specific width. So that kind of got it, again, kind of made the access road a certain width, and therefore the planter along that western side, at least the portion along the mini storage facility, wasn't going to be met in order to have that access road being installed on that side. So that was kind of one of the major components as to why the applicant was shifting towards a smaller planter based on the conversations that we had. Another thing to add is that regarding the trees, the landscape width, it's relatively small. It's 4.5 feet, so it wouldn't really be able to support necessarily like a big major tree.
Should we bring that exhibit up?
Yeah, go back to it.
Just to add, Kimber Gutierrez, senior planner, is that the typical requirement is trees 30 feet on center, and that is included within the deviation as well. So that is part of the deviation to decrease the size of the planter, is to not achieve that.
So the fire access easement has to be a set width, but is there anything preventing the building from being smaller or from shifting to the east?
So the building right now, the mini storage facility, it's currently not meeting the setback. That's why it's part of that special development permit. Technically, they could shift it. I think we would just have to analyze it a bit further. But given that this is the proposal that we reviewed, kind of looking at if we could shift it a bit more here and there, we would have to take a look at it further.
Sorry, any further questions?
Yes. Did we look at the CPAC brought up a comment of concerns related to the overconcentration of fueling stations? Did we look at the number of service stations within some sort of radius?
No, we did not, but I know that there is a gas station right in front of the project site. I understand that there's also some fueling stations going, westward on Greenback Lane, as well as over here going eastward on Greenback Lane.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bora?
And thank you for the presentation, Mr. Huerta, and for the staff for your hard work on preparing this. I think kind of piggybacking off this question, when do we, as planners, I think, start looking at the cumulative impacts of the potential overconcentration of different fueling stations in a given area? So I'm looking at the environmental document right now, and it seems that we're looking at it as a project by project. But do we, as we're preparing the mitigated negative declaration, also look at, okay, are we going to be having a threshold that's more than just significant with all of this in a specific corridor? I know we're looking at the Sacramento Valley Basin, and perhaps it would be up to SMACMAT or the Air Quality Management District to raise their hands, but we're kind of controlling all the amount of projects that are going through the process.
I could defer that over to environmental review for further discussion.
Good evening, Julie Newton, environmental planner, environmental coordinator. And when we're looking at these projects, we start by looking at the individual projects, individual impacts for each project. In the case of this project, impacts were below significance thresholds. Commissioner Borja, you did mention the air district. Each of these fueling facilities are subject to permitting and regulations through the air district. So the air district does have a number of regulations that they consider before issuing a permit. So that is also taken into consideration through the air district's permitting process.
Understood. So it would be incumbent upon them to raise their hands and say, hey, before we provide this license or this permit.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. And then another question, I might have missed it, but is the applicant having a parallel application for the alcoholic beverage use? We're not considering that in here, but have they been going to a parallel but separate motions and working with the sheriff's office and all the other community safety organizations, perhaps?
Yeah, just to clarify. So yeah, the applicant has applied for a public convenience and/or necessity letter. That's being processed under a separate application. It is not being considered tonight. That will be considered, however, though, by the Board of Supervisors once we take this project to the board. I believe it's my understanding that the applicant is pursuing a Type 20 license, so beer and wine, and they have received a letter from the sheriff, and my understanding is they've been coordinating with them regarding that license.
Understood. So while it's not a requirement for us to consider that, would it be safe to assume that if they were, able to get that conditions from the sheriff, that they would either meet or exceed any of the safety parameters that the sheriff or the board of supervisors would have to put for them in order to get that license. Because I did notice on the CPAC that there might have been one small comment about safety and security and what a 24-hour service station may bring to that community.
Yeah, so with the, so just to kind of dive in a little bit on kind of how the licensing works with alcohol. So the alcoholic beverage control is one that enforces and adds conditions on that liquor license. However, they do consider what the sheriff does provide into their ultimate license. But that's not configured by us by planning, nor by the board. We can't add conditions or any of that. But yeah, that's a separate process, though, from what we're considering tonight.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And then there was a couple of comments about electric vehicle parking spaces. I'm assuming that the amount of parking stalls that they are already providing will exceed any of the near-term changes that could happen with the Cal Green Code being updated. I think I saw somewhere in the application that they're providing 6 fully equipped EV stalls, which I think for a project at this size, I guess yeah, combining both the gas station and the storage unit, it seems to me, I didn't do the math yet, but it seems to me that would be more than enough EV stalls required. Okay. Then the last thing about just the CPAC, I guess procedurally, there were a couple of projects here where the CPAC kind of asked, or I don't know how to describe it, where they preemptively asked for more than just the saying no to the project, or they essentially advised the board to, not just the Planning Commission, but the board also to not just deny the project, but I don't know what the right term is. There was a couple of projects ago that we considered where the CPAC said not just deny, but I might be at a loss here, Planning Director Smith.
Preemptive appeal?
Preemptive appeal, sorry. Is that at all? I'm blanking out here. Was there a preemptive appeal here, or did they just say we're not supporting the project?
No preemptive appeal. I believe I'll leave the planning director to kind of discuss further on how that process works.
I apologize, sir. Thank you, Director Smith.
So, yeah, good question. In this case, the CPAC did not pre-authorize the appeal because the final hearing body is the Board of Supervisors.
Understood.
So there's no one to appeal to.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Learned a lesson or two here today. That's it for my question. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just had a follow-up to my colleague's question about just density or concentration of service stations, or maybe other items as well. We look at these as a project-by-project basis. Correct in that? I mean, that is logical, but we don't look around within like, okay, there's like 5 within a half a mile or something like that, or 10 within. We don't do some sort of broader evaluation.
I can touch on it. Okay. So the zoning code doesn't necessarily have any regulations, use regulations, or anything in terms of over-concentration of automobile service stations. We do have it for other uses, massage parlors, for example. I think there's a couple other pawn shops, I think, are another one. But for automobile service stations, we do not have that over-concentration requirement. We do, however, have some guidance in the zoning code about where these are located. So obviously the first choice is to find a site that used to have a gas station or had some sort of gas station in the past that maybe is no longer in operation. That way the site is already disturbed, has seen that sort of type of use there before, and so that's the preference. For new primary automobile service stations, our zoning code does say that no new primary automobile service station shall be permitted on lots abutting residentially zoned property unless the Planning Commission finds that the design of the service station, along with the conditions placed on the use permit, will mitigate any adverse effects the station may have on abutting residential property. So it's essentially determining that the design of the project is sufficient and the project is conditioned in a way to eliminate any adverse effects on adjacent residential property.
But in terms of evaluating, thank you very much for that. But in terms of evaluating if there is an overconcentration, we're never going to get to the answer of that question as it relates to this particular use because it is just a single
Correct.
kind of point in time, point in place. Okay, thank you.
Can we switch for a second to the northern line? I have a little confusion over is the easement on this parcel? We'll start with that question. The easement that currently exists that allows cut through to the senior facility next door, is that on this parcel?
Yes.
Okay, and I see some comments about it being 35 feet wide versus 24 feet wide. Is that easement sufficient? What's being changed with that easement? Is it still going to be 35 feet wide?
So 35 feet wide is the easement that's for the property, but it's going to be reduced down to 24 feet. Might be a bit hard to see, but they are doing some parking stalls along this side of the facility, as well as with the access easement over here, as shown. So yes, they would be reducing down to 24 feet because they're doing the addition of parking stalls.
Got it. So 24 feet wide is sufficient for emergency vehicle access to get in there. And then is there a masonry wall between that easement and the residence next door?
Yes, there's currently an existing sound wall that exists, and that is situated over here right along the property line of the resident that lives on this side.
Okay. And then just for clarification, I think it's in the staff report, but the mini storage use would be a by right use with the existing zoning?
Yes, that's correct. No use permit would be required for the mini storage use.
So just the use permit is only pertaining to the
Gas
station. Okay.
And convenience store. Yeah.
I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you, Mr. Huerta. Any other questions for staff before we move to the applicant?
Yeah, just one last, sir, and thank you, Chair Rathel. I saw that the last letter that was submitted by the senior living facility adjacent to the property was in May of this year in anticipation of the CPAC hearing. Have we received any other notices from them or further engagement or anything that addresses their concerns after the CPAC had voted?
We did. It was pertaining to when we took the PCN letter component in September to the CPAC, but we haven't had any further correspondence with them since September.
All right. Any other questions for staff? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant up, and anyone that will be answering questions tonight on the applicant's behalf will get you all sworn in at once.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
If you're going to answer questions, we'll get you sworn in all at once. If you could stand, and the clerk will get you sworn in.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have to come up. You can just hang out right there.
Yes, thank you. If you could please raise your right hands, and the appropriate response is I do. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, so help you God? And if you do not swear, do you so affirm?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so when you're at the podium, as you are, sir, please state your name for the record and make the statement, I have been sworn.
My name is Paul Petrovich, owner of the property, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and the balance of the Planning Commission. Irving, could you put up the colored site plan, please? Or am I able to do that here? Yes. Okay, a few things to unpack here, and I think after I'm done explaining a few things, hopefully you feel a little bit better about some of the things that are of concern. First of all, the driveway on the very north of the property was a gift of easement by me to the original developer of the Almond Heights project. They couldn't develop it without a secondary emergency vehicle access. They did not have that easement. The original developer back in 2013 and I sat down and discussed this. He wanted to buy my property for about 1/10 of its value and incorporate it into this. And I explained to him that it had commercial zoning, and I pointed out all the uses and went over that with him. I've been a developer just in this region for 43 years, and I understand communication and development challenges that especially go with infill projects. So the reason why that exists there, instead of, say, between the back of the Arco convenience station and the Almond Heights, as an example, is the topography was too great. So I went over my intentions with the property back when Almond Heights, before it was approved. That property was zoned agricultural residential and was rezoned to allow what's there now. Let me quickly eliminate any concerns about cut-through traffic. We will have a gated entrance key code pad right. Okay, Irving, how do I get this thing to point? Right there. Okay. So unless you are a renter, you will not have the right to get past this point. All right? So there'll be no cut-through traffic whatsoever. If it pleases the Planning Commission, I would be happy to accept a condition that also puts a fire gate right there. That would be a permanent gate that is what we call a Knox box, where the fire trucks can push through it as a secondary preventative measure for people coming through. But we don't want people coming through this driveway and then ending up behind here and trapped. We want them to be cut off here and not have to make the journey back along the back of the building. One of the reasons we originally planned to have this planter that's behind this two-story building, it was originally 3 feet wider. We were going to put the full planter in. The fire department came to us with a request and asked that we reduce it so that they can have enough vehicle access for the emergency trucks and so forth. So we accommodated that. There will be shrubbery and landscaping and vines on that wall, but the only people that will ever see it are the people that are part of and rent a storage unit. It is invisible to Hickory, Lane, and/or Greenback. The rest of the project has tremendous amount of landscaping, and if any of you know the corner of Howe and Fair Oaks, where I recently planted 52 100-year-old, 150-year-old olive trees, I will be doing that in this project as well. I've owned this property for 21 years, and I've been trying to find the right uses. I raised my family for 20 years, a mile and a half from this site. I developed a $40 million shopping center at the corner of Hazel and Madison. That site was identical to this site in that it was scrub oak that had unhoused. We found guns, hypodermic needles, trash, and the one siding that we received on this property, we went ahead, I did, and spent $250,000 to remove 20,000 cubic yards of dirt and paid for the tree mitigation to remove all the scrub oaks that were on the property as a good faith gesture to the community. Now it has one tree that is a heritage tree that we decided we could keep, but we have spent a lot of money to eliminate the absolute blight that was on this corner. 6 years ago, I submitted an application for this property with these exact uses in the exact location that you see them. 1 year later, Almond Heights was purchased by the current owner for $31 million. On record in public record and with a sign on the property, they still went ahead, this company from Irvine, and bought that facility. Am I trying to say in a friendly way or direct way that this was known before they made that acquisition? Absolutely. Is it fair to come back and say, oh, we didn't know you gave us the easement to make that project feasible. This is not an appropriate use. There's an overdensification. It shouldn't have all these things that we're trying to accomplish. But no, we're of course not my backyard. Relative to the fueling station, it's a use allowed by right subject to the conditional use permit. Conditional use permit standards for a fuel station are, does it create a public nuisance? And does it have human health risk? Those are the two standards. Public nuisance is purely defined when it comes to a fuel station. Is the design of the fuel station done in such a manner that cars will not back up onto the public streets? This plan was designed so that that does not happen. If you notice the orientation of the fueling, of the 6 fueling stations. Second of all, health and human risk. AQMD is relentless and protects the public on how many gallons can be pumped at any given station. They hire an air quality expert. They take into account prevailing winds, and they issue a permit as to how many gallons can be pumped from any given facility. That process takes place after a conditional use permit is issued, if it's issued. There is monthly reporting to AQMD. If you exceed the amount of gallons that they say you're allowed to pump, they shut you down. It's that simple. This spillage of benzene, which is the critical element for gasoline, occurs when somebody drives off with the hose connected to their car. Ever since we all agreed or have been using those rubber gaskets that are on the fuel pumps, that eliminated just the free flowing of benzene into the air. Benzene dissipates to 75% in 100 feet and completely within 200 feet of the source. So something along the lines of 1 per 100,000 customers, they drive off with the hose still in the car. There's a release of 6 to 8 ounces of benzene, and it dissipates within 200 feet. The prevailing winds then come into account, and they would be heading south, which might get us to the other side of Greenback Lane. I want the commission to know that I take very seriously concerns of communities. I have my entire development career. I've built nearly 100 projects just in this region, and I would like to address those that were brought up at the CPAC. I already addressed the landscape planner issue along the westerly wall. Exterior lighting, there was concern about exterior lighting from this project into their property, the Almond Heights property. I believe the county has a dark sky ordinance. If you want to condition me to have a dark sky ordinance approach to lighting, happy to accept it. I do it in all my projects. If by chance you can see the source of light from the adjoining property, I will also accept a condition to put ballast so that you can't see it from looking up into the light. I've been doing this sort of light attenuation for 25 years, and it's not a big deal. It's not hard to make life better, but we don't have lights shining just out into the sky. Might as well address alcohol sales here and now. There are typically 3 allowed in a given area. And currently there are 2 active Schedule 20 licenses in this particular ABC district. One is active but suspended. That license was associated with the Walgreens at the corner of Greenback and Hazel. That building has been fully demolished, And this planning commission probably heard the Dutch Brothers and Car Wash approvals for that corner, neither of which will be deploying alcohol. There's a strong chance that ARCO will acquire that license since Walgreens has no use for it. More on the alcohol. ARCO does not sell fortified wines, does not sell single beers, only 6-pack at a time. They have highly trained staff, so it's not sold to minors. And here's a good one. Corporately, with technology, all the cases that hold alcohol locked at 10 o'clock. Not 2, as are all the surrounding places that sell alcohol. There's no way an employee can override it or anything. Alcohol sales end at 10, period. And it doesn't open again until 7 a.m. They also have the highest quality surveillance, both inside and out of their facility, which is desperately lacking in this area. Also, Winco offers a wider, much wider, it's a 100,000 square foot grocery store that sells till 2 a.m. And they sell their products, their alcohol products, probably for 40% less than ARCO. It's only a convenience when it comes to ARCO. Adequate parking was another concern. There's 2,900 square foot convenience store, only requires 12 spaces. We're providing 18. We addressed the cut-through traffic and light spillage. Let's talk about EV chargers. ARCO BP is a Fortune 10 company leading the world in alternative fuel technology. They have over 40,000 EV chargers in Europe alone. They are designing all of their stations, including this one, to be ready to meet the demand and to put in a large enough transformer to allow more and more full conversion to EVs. You got to ask yourself, why would a Fortune 10 company enter into a 25-year lease with me when the sale of gasoline-powered cars is going to end probably within 9 years of them opening the station? They're looking towards the future. I think that also addresses the overconcentration issue. In 9 or 10 years, you can't buy a car, a new car, that takes fossil fuel. So ARCO is clearly, through their Pulse program, setting up these stations and agreeing to be there long-term to convert to that new platform. The C-Store will have a place for people to charge their phones, take care of their mail, there's a diagram on how a Pulse facility works, and that's the wave of the future. As is ARCO with the lowest cost fueling operation out there. They also plan on being the fastest and least expensive charging facility operation in our communities. Possible to get the overhead projector to work? What I'm showing you here is the master plan.
Could you flip that around for us so it's
Of course.
north?
This way or this way?
There we go.
Oh,
That's north is up, right?
that is right.
There you go.
So, I think this thing's low on batteries.
I don't know if that works with the
Oh, with that.
projector. Yeah.
The stripe property is the subject property. So you know, why this site is so intensely developed is through the 146 conditions of approval, I have to spend $1.8 million just in offsites. I have to almost double the width of Hickory. I have to almost double the width of Greenback. I have to relocate the signal. I have to put in a turn lane and a bus stop. Currently, I have unsafe conditions out there. And with these infill locations, I always run into this where you have to pick up the slack and there's no county budget or anything. So just that component alone to add to the public safety has a $1.8 million price tag. The reason I wanted this graphic up is to show you in red the concentration of commercial development in the corridor in the area. This property has been zoned commercial for over 1/2 century. Okay? The commercial property rights here have been vested. Again, the storage facility probably has the lowest traffic generation of any commercial use you could imagine. I designed it to buffer the neighborhood from the fuel station to the extent there's nervousness about it. Also, if any of you live near a street, a main corridor that has 50,000 cars a day on it, the noise emanating from it at a signalized intersection is atrocious. That 2-story, 56-foot tall facility is going to block noise and attenuate it for the existing community. It also protects them from other cultural issues that may exist. As with many of my projects, I try to go the extra mile, knowing the culture, knowing the rural status of Orangevale. Just as I built the 16-foot tall chrome rooster at Hazel and Madison for the Safeway Center, an homage here at greater expense than just a box is to create a red barn. It fits in with the neighborhood. It is a very attractive looking building, and it's inert as it comes to relative to traffic and noise and privacy. The Design Review Committee approved this project in about 15 minutes without change, unanimously. There is no car wash associated with this development. There are no repair bays. The term service station is antiquated. It's a fuel station that, as technology advances, will dispense whatever fuel is being used by the community and required by law. So, in summary, I think it's a great project, an infill project, provides a lot of public benefit and street improvements, providing future services that are much needed. There's a lot of range anxiety. They'll lead the way and provide this community a place to charge their cars. The storage facility is a great buffer in addition to the community. I've done my best to answer all these questions, and Almond Heights should have known that this was happening before they made the acquisition. I understand that many times people that are hired to manage the facility aren't aware of what the Irvine-based company acquired and didn't do their research, but I don't think this property should be affected by that, if you will. If I can answer any questions, I would appreciate the opportunity to do so. I ask for your support and the opportunity to rebut any testimony.
Thank you. Was it Mr. Pektovich? Is that correct?
Petrovich, yes.
Petrovich. I'll kick us off. Can you talk a little bit about the western property line? You said the fire department had requested the reduction of that landscape barrier. But I see, as we kind of move down to the fuel station, it gets narrower again. Fire trucks are entering in a 24-foot easement. So I'm trying to work that out in my own head. If a fire truck's coming in 24 feet, if they're going out in 24 feet, why the heck do they need 27 feet in the middle along this whole property line?
Because fire gets whatever they ask for, sir. I've
So they
been
don't
doing
want
this
trees?
a long time, and there is no check and balance on the fire department. What they ask for, and the issue is, if you go to the county executive or you go to a politician and say, look, I think this is extreme, usually the fire chief or somebody will say to the elected official, okay, sign here that you're going to be responsible for health and safety if there's ever a problem. Okay, you get what you want.
And in the 7-foot wide planter that does exist down by the service station, there's also not trees per the development standard.
I believe there are trees right here. This is a 7-foot planter, and it only dips to the 4-foot planter from there to here, which is invisible to the public.
So those shrubs that are there?
We will
Or those-
plant shrubs along the western boundary of the property here,
Okay.
but here there will be trees planted and shrubbery. And then these are larger shade trees. These might be ornamental in nature along here, but these will be larger shade trees that are associated with the 50% coverage of shade requirement for parking spaces.
Yeah, I'm really worried about the property line trees because they look the same on the landscape plan. Oh, whether they're in a 7-foot wide or a 4.5-foot wide.
The architect is here.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Maybe he can answer that. His name's Ahmed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Ahmad Gadiri with ANS Engineering. We were just
If you
waiting
could,
to...
you could say
I'm sorry.
for the record, I have been sworn.
Oh, I've been sworn. Sorry,
Perfect.
my apologies, I forgot. To reiterate what Paul indicated, the 7-foot planter that's along the west side of the service station does accommodate additional trees. However, as part of the, we're getting comments still back, so this plan will be updated to reflect the required trees, if I'm not mistaken, every 30 feet. I think that's what it is. And based on the dimension along that path, probably you're looking at about 3 to 4 trees. And it'll be updated.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
And maybe you can shine some light on the request from Metro Fire. It seems like you were the only one. Okay. I figured maybe the architect had more technical information on this. So it seems like an odd request. So.
Ahmed, he represents ARCO and does all their work.
Okay.
I hire the architect for the overall planning and the self-storage facility. And that was a direct comment as we were going through the pre-development process and application. If you want us to shift the building 3 feet towards Hickory, no?
The request was for the ladder.
Can you kind of come up?
It's Caleb Huskins, and he has been sworn, but I'll let him say that. He's my
Caleb,
VP
I've been
development.
sworn. The request was because the ladder truck for a 2-story building, they need it to be wider where they work on the building. So they can drive in on the 24 feet, but once they get in and they need to be able to
Put down the riggers.
access the building, they need it wider.
Okay. So they're not worried about that on the north side of the building? Because that's 24.
They got enough room on the north side because you've got the easement and the road coming in. It's fine. There were all comments back from fire.
Okay, I'm confused because there's a 24-foot easement on the north side of the building. There's the exact same size parking. Hey, maybe there's a couple feet different. It's hard to tell on the plan because you've had a little more green space there. But okay, I think I see what you're saying. At least so we know technically where the comment is coming from.
Commissioner Rathel, if I may add a little bit of
Sure.
further detail, and I can obviously rely on Kimber and Irving, but the letter from the fire district indicates exactly what the applicant has said, which is Let me find that sentence. Because of the height, they need aerial access, and the minimum aerial apparatus access is 26 feet in width, within 15 to 30 feet of the building, and located on at least two sides of the building. So they don't, according to this letter, it doesn't require 26 feet all the way around, just on at least two sides.
Understood. So 26 feet, we have I guess that's assuming you have cars parked in those spots then. Because you have 27 feet right now on the plan, plus you have all those parking spots.
Are you talking on the north side or?
On the west side.
On the west side.
Yeah.
That's an overhang, yes, where cars can, out of the sun.
Okay.
Not to change subjects as far as alcohol.
Sure.
Sheriff already weighed in, provided their comments and their requirements, and ARCO's already agreed to all of them. So that's been covered.
Sounds good. Further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Borja, going to start us off?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Petrovich. I appreciate the kind of walking us through.
Of course.
I appreciate you sharing that you'd be willing to, for the commission to consider about dimming down for light pollution. At this moment, I'm not a big fan of that because of the safety concerns. It's kind of a cart before the horse. They want more safety, but we need more lights. But I appreciate you at least offering that you would dim it for a nighter sky. But I feel like your alcohol permit might require you to have brighter lights, which, again, not this hearing body. I was just curious, sir, and maybe your architect can answer this. One of the deviations you requested is the allowable root structure height. And I think at Mr. Werder's presentation, he just mentioned that 2.5 feet was not enough, and you all are proposing 3, a little bit taller than that, to comply with something about local ordinance or the look and feel of the orange fail. What exactly is it that in our ordinance that's kind of restricting? Is it because we won't be able to fit the ARCO logo in there, or?
No, we're talking about this upper canopy here, and ARCO would live with the standard, but the Greenback special planning area, from what I heard Irving present, required it to have a thicker band. The deviation is that one, which I think is a total of 8 inches on the band. I didn't do the math when you were presenting it. And then the canopy height is a deviation of 6 inches due to trucks.
Oh yeah, no issue, sir, with the height. It was just that second one that says the allowable roof structure height that we're increasing. I was just wondering why the case. Like, was there like a plan to put solar panels in there to make the structure more sound? I just that 1.5 feet was just I don't know why the SPA mentioned that specific.
Oh, I can go ahead and answer that, or Irving with planning. Yeah, so it might be hard to see, but there is, right on top of the structure, there is kind of like a thicker, like beige, kind of like gray, roof line over here located. If you look at exhibit, yeah, so right around there, actually. So that, they're adding that, and then they're also adding over here the stone pillars with the stone veneer. So they're increasing the height again in order to give that appeal of the town and country aesthetic for the Greenback SPA.
There'll be masonry on the columns.
Oh, so if I'm hearing you right, sir, adding the masonry to columns basically increased the height, and it's not more of a structural component. Okay, understood. Thank you. And then And thank you for kind of shedding light about your dealings with the previous owner of the property adjacent to you. Would that be, if we were to move with this item, would that become an issue? Or do you see anything in our approvals that would perhaps preclude you from moving forward with the project, assuming that we vote on this today, with your relationship with the neighboring property now that they've sent all these other comments?
The neighboring property is not the same as the developer. They purchased it after I submitted my application for this. And what I understand is through the easement that I granted for their emergency access and secondary access, because they only front on Greenback on a narrow frontage. I'll do whatever is required, but I have a certain amount of parking I got. It's a large building, but I don't need a lot of parking because it's self-storage and it's a pretty dormant use. But maybe I'm misinterpreting. The request on that easement area would be to...
Well, I guess I was just wondering, would that then impact their ability to continue as a congregate living facility if your easement was to, I guess I'm trying to...
If it was to go away?
Yeah. I'm just a little lost as to whether or not
I don't
that would...
see a reason why there couldn't be a fire gate with an Knox box thing that they're used to going through. I don't know how critical that is to their operation. I wouldn't want to affect their operation if that easement is important to their operation for loading and other things, you know, the big ADA accessible vehicles and so forth. Greenback's a pretty busy street.
Yes, sir.
And it's obviously a lot easier to come in off of a quiet Hickory Lane. But it's not critical to me, per se. It's there, so I took advantage of where it was asked to be placed. If I was to do it over again, I would say, how about in the middle of the property? Mm-hmm. But they have those rights that are vested and recorded on my property for that easement as it exists today.
Okay, understood.
So it would take them to agree to any modification, but I think they're not interested in that, and that's fine with me.
Okay.
If it answers a concern of yours, you know, I'll attempt to have that discussion with them if you're so inclined to approve the project tonight as we go forward to the Board of Supervisors.
Understood. Thank you for that offer, sir. And then just one last question about, and thank you for kind of going down the line addressing the some of the CPAC comments and kind of concerns provided. You said there were no car washes, so the noise, so there wouldn't have that noise. It is a 24-hour facility, but I don't believe that there's a large noise impacts. What other preventative measures might you have already put in there to just make sure that we try to provide the safety and security for, I believe it's a senior living facility that's next to you?
Well, now we're going to have eyes on the street instead of a place for people to hide. And we're going to complete the pedestrian connection from Almond Heights to the intersection and then across to the Winco. I think that's a huge benefit, and also for them to cross the street, come across my frontage, and be able to go across Greenback and over to the other services that exist. So I think the property is providing, on that level, a lot of good. The street improvements are enormous and address safety. Relative to it being a fuel station, and my instincts tell me that there's still a concern, perhaps, with the overconcentration of fuel. And the way, and I don't know if you want me to answer other questions before I go there, but...
No, I think that's good. So just one follow-up question. From staging all the way to perhaps when your gas station opens, roughly about how many months of construction will the seniors kind of have to deal with?
Well, right now, they've just endured a major Greenback Lane overlay that we were told wasn't going to occur until October of next year. And then we were notified 30 days before they started that it was happening this year. And we did a mad scramble to redesign our utilities because they were going to come from Greenback Lane. We solved that. But to answer your question, I imagine the site work and the self-storage facility is going to be a second phase. I don't get into design of such an expensive facility until I know I have my approvals. I'm not a Fortune 10 company. I have 8 employees. So probably 6 months before construction starts, they have most of their plans done, and the total construction is probably 6 months. 6 months. If you want to see a version of this, I was involved in are the landlord in Plumas Lake, where they built a very similar station, almost identical actually. It's very clean. It's very well run. This is a corporate store, by the way. This is not a franchise organization or group running this. This is a corporate ARCO station that comes with all the standards and requirements of corporate ARCO.
Okay.
They actually have to report to the Queen or the King now.
Understood. Thank you, sir. I did stop you from sharing your thoughts about the overconcentration of gas station.
To me, we all understand the age-old supply and demand issue. There's only so much fuel that's going to be sold, and adding a better, cleaner environment at better prices will eliminate, by nature, other fueling stations that aren't maintaining their properties and aren't as safe as this would be. And to me, the market will prove how many are really needed. And in this one in particular, being completely designed to eliminate all fossil fuel distribution from adding additional EV chargers in the parking spaces, the 17, 18 spaces, plus eventually replacing what we call the MPDs, the fuel pumps. This will be the future. This will be the one that survives. This will be the one that will cause others to go away and be repurposed. It's just the nature of real estate. You end up with properties that are obsolete that eventually need to be reused. And I see that, ARCO wouldn't be investing $7 million and me another $3.5 million, well, actually $5 million, if this wasn't viable, if there wasn't a need and they offer many other things too, like quality coffee and other items in their convenience store. The market demand is what determines whether there's an overconcentration or not. The Valero, maybe Commissioner Devlin is aware of it, Centerville and Freeport. They're no longer selling gas. They just have the C-store open. And by the way, there is a condition in here that if ARCO ever stops using the fueling pumps, they have to remove the tanks, the pumps, and the lines within, I think it's a 180-day notice. No other gas station has that requirement. So the public is protected from there being an abandonment of this station if it doesn't work. And they gladly agreed to that because they don't want the liability sitting there. They want to start charging cars.
Commissioner Borja, any further questions for the applicant team? Commissioner Devlin, questions for the applicant team?
No.
Commissioner Conklin, any further questions? I think I'll wait for public comment, and then we'll let you rebut after that, and may have a few more questions for you after that.
Thank you.
Do we have public comment this evening?
We don't.
No? Great, you can grab a form from the back there. Perfect.
And sir, you can make your comment and then we'll get it filled out afterwards, if that's okay with the chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm Stephen McDonald. I'm the administrator of the senior living community that sits to the west of the property. I've been with the company for 2.5 years, so not knowing the previous history, this is something now that I've taken on to look after the 112 residents that currently reside in the senior living community. And so as we look at the north easement, there was a discussion about, is there a need for that to remain? That is actually one of an emergency evacuation route that we have as part of our emergency plan in the community to be able to potentially evacuate residents in the event of fire, flood, whatever it might be, to be able to evacuate out of that portion. And then also the west vegetation is a concern that we do have in that providing privacy to the residents that live there. There is a current wall that exists between our property and the proposed property. However, in the back northwest corner, that wall actually disappears. It's a tiered wall that then disappears into that back west corner. And so even the excavation of 6 to 8 feet down would negate anything because there is no wall there. So a wall would potentially need to be added to that to meet that process. There's also a retaining wall that already is on the north easement, including utilities that we have installed, exterior lighting, landscaping, sprinklers, which would need to be relocated in the such for that location as well. And then the question with cutting through the property, it's not necessarily cutting through the plot and land that we're discussing now. It's really cutting through the senior living community that exists that could potentially take place with the increased traffic that might be at that corner of not wanting to wait for the light and cutting through our property and kind of bypassing that intersection at Hickory and Greenback, which is the concern that we have on that. Many things have been mentioned about the alcohol sales, which is great. Great features that have been put in place that those sales stop at 10. The concern is that we're still right there, right next to this gas station that is, again, we have 112 senior citizens that live right next door to a place that is pumping out gas throughout the day and potentially always sometimes inviting not the savoriest of savory crowds to that location. So these are our main concerns that we have with the proposal and what we addressed at the CPAC meeting as well as here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further comments this evening?
I do not think so. Is there anyone else? I don't think, no, that's it for us.
Perfect. With that, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And I'll invite the applicant back up to address the public comment, if you'd like.
First, I'd like to thank the Almond Heights representative for understanding now that he's heard perhaps a more thorough explanation, and I take it upon myself. I should have perhaps had more communication with them ahead of time. The cut-through concern, I understand it. But it's not being generated by increased traffic that's going to the self-storage facility. It would be traffic that's coming down Hickory, which is a very minor collector. It'd be the neighborhood itself. The ARCO traffic will be coming off of Greenback mainly and exiting back onto Greenback. The only traffic that would be coming to the ARCO would be the surrounding neighborhood going to the ARCO and back to their homes to the north. Doing my darndest to make this work, and I appreciate you working with me. And again, I'm happy to solve any problem I can. But it's a challenging site, it's an expensive site, and I've tried to create the right buffers and the right use for the economics that it requires to make this infill site work, which I think is a general plan goal, is to do infill development.
I'll ask you for the first option, how do we meet the fire department requirements and also meet the expected screening? Because obviously the neighbor has a concern.
Sure.
And I think it's a valid concern that they would expect the development standards to be followed on the property next to them when it gets developed.
It's a fair point. First of all, he brought up a very good point about the wall being insufficiently high. We've agreed to, as a condition, to increase the height of that wall where it is insufficient after we're finished grading the property. So we will, of course, meet standards when it comes to the height of the wall. I would like to, and this is not an attempt to get out of trying to figure out a way to put trees in there, but this is Almond Heights, this is this property. The berm from their project and plus it's got to be a 12-foot wall on their side, is a pretty big barrier And the sight line is pretty extreme. I'm all for trees, don't get me wrong, but we're not like this or level, we're like this. And I will meet with my team and see if we can scooch the building 3 feet closer to Hickory if staff is in agreement and we're not running into any major utility issues. I know that we're not as wide on landscaping as they would like. So there's a give and take. Do we maintain a bigger landscaping buffer on Hickory where the public is and is walking versus a planter that's 3 feet shy where nobody sees it?
Well, I guess I'm a little confused on that nobody sees, the idea of a screening tree, especially when it's sitting next to a 2-story building.
Yes.
The idea is that you're screening the face of that building, right? So when I'm in my retirement home and I'm looking out my window, I'm looking at a tree instead of looking at the side of a wall with a 2-story building on top of it, right?
I have an idea. If I could gain permission from Almond Heights, what if I planted some tall, fast-growing trees on their side of the wall to create a tree barrier from that direction at my expense? Because I wasn't afraid to plant the trees.
Yeah, this is getting into the technical details that I'm not sure are best solved at a planning commission meeting.
The
This is one
design
of the-
review said,
Yeah, this is one of the challenges we face when we get to here and some of these development standards haven't been met. We're kind of between a rock and a hard place, right?
nature of infill development, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and I think, there's nothing, to me, really, that says that building has to be the size that it is, right?
If it's not, the economics don't work.
Okay.
It's that simple. It is at a breaking point right now. I mean, with all the cost and regulations and building permit fees and 1.8 million in street improvements on a 1.8 acre site, new signals, $1.2 million. And then we have to put cameras and everything and interlink it with fiber optic to all the other signals. I mean, it is a massive undertaking for a 1.8 net acre site. I mean, that's what you would see typically with a 10 acre or much larger site. There's a breaking point with these properties.
Understood. Any other questions for the applicant? Well, after public comment? All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'll kick us off this evening.
Excuse me.
Yes.
My VP of construction just informed me that we can plant hedges in that narrow planter that would grow above the wall and act as screening instead of just small shrubs. And if you want to amend the condition, that we would plant shrubbery that has the ability to grow, higher. Or if you want a row of Italian cypress or something, they don't take much.
Okay.
We're willing to do more than we. Any idea is welcome.
Okay. So, I'll kick us off. I don't love special development permits. I feel like I say that every meeting. You all know that. For this reason, right? We get here, the applicant has spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and it's just like, we're just going to tweak this one little thing a little bit. But in this case, it does have a significant impact, I think, on the neighbor. And so that's where I'm hung up. I do appreciate the extras for the project, the design of the project. I appreciate the safety improvements that would go in along the street for the pedestrian access. I think that's huge for the area. And I think, the other special development conditions, I don't have any issue with. But I also don't want to try to figure out last minute a plan on how to solve this without consultation with the technical details, right, with Sac Metro and staff working through this with the applicant. So I guess at this point, I have really, my thoughts are we can either, what I would be supportive of is moving everything forward without that third exception in the special development permit. Or, I think that's probably best. It's going to the supervisors anyway. And I think that would be a better option since they have another hearing anyway. That would be a better option to me than continuing the project. And then they have some time to sort it out. And at the end of the day, that would at least allow them to work on this major concern with the special development permit. But I know there's some other issues with the project, so I'll give you guys a chance to weigh in. My only concern really is just the impact to the neighbors on this one. I think the other concerns have been addressed and I'm comfortable with. Or if no one has further comment, I'm happy to make a motion.
Sorry, Chair, I just have a question to you. So you're saying that you're comfortable moving it, excluding the third bullet point, or what exactly is your motion?
Well, I haven't made a motion yet. I think what I'm not comfortable with is just giving the landscape planner deviation with the special development permit. So I'm comfortable making a recommendation for everything, but striking the landscape planner deviation from the special development permit and allowing them to work through it. They can always, try to add it back in with the Board of Supervisors. We are making a recommendation this evening. But I think then they can look at, hey, can they move the building east? Do they need to shrink the building? They can shrink it, kick it out further north because it looks like they got a little room on the north. So I know that gets into, there's a lot of money that's been spent on the design of the building already, but that would then basically give them the ability between now and the Board of Supervisors meeting to address that.
Director Smith, does that move the project, assuming that, I don't know if that, I don't understand if that kills the project.
It presents the challenge of, do you call it a recommendation for approval or something else? Because they might not look at that as an approval. That, I don't know if it's a project killer or not to take away that third deviation. We can communicate to the Board of Supervisors what, and I don't even know how the other three of you are going to, join in on this, but as far as that recommendation, we can communicate it to the board, and I think they'll understand. I'm just wondering if we call it, you can say you approve the use permit and you approve 2 of the 3 requested deviations, but ultimately that might actually effectively, stop the project.
Yeah, I think I would add, Commissioner Borja, to respond to you and Commissioner Rathel. We are talking over here as you are all deliberating about how we can work with the applicant as they've identified on some potential solutions there, knowing that the fire department has the specification that they are requiring the project to meet. What I heard the applicant say is a willingness to figure out any potential solution, and correct me if I'm wrong, relative to certain plant species that might provide a visual screen more so than a traditional broad canopy tree within the space available, which may fluctuate as we have those conversations on the technical aspects between the storage building and the property line. I am a little bit reluctant to throw out there moving the building further east, because that would potentially change the nature of a special development permit on that side that we haven't yet articulated. But I think at this point we could, thinking about maybe a friendly modification to the motion such that staff and the applicant work together to maximize that landscape strip and provide a certain species of potentially shrubs or smaller trees that would provide a suitable screen. And I'll defer to Kimber and or Irving to add any more to that.
Yeah, my only thought is that it would be more of like a recommendation from the Planning Commission to pursue other options to potentially meet the development standards for the landscape screening or find an alternative solution for the screening along that planter.
If I may.
Of course.
I see a very willing applicant, and I see very bright and talented staff that have been working on this for a long period of time. And, we've got a tremendous amount, I think a very thoughtful applicant that's been working with the local sheriff and the fire into some very detailed logistics and issues that I really don't feel we should try to unravel. And we've got a project here that's, enhancing the beautification, improving on the streets, improving security and safety, creating economic opportunity, job opportunities, and to all of a sudden change the footprint or the dynamics of how a business works or how a project would pencil out in order for it to move forward. I really don't want to move in that general direction. I think we can move forward as is and task the staff to continue to work with the applicant and neighbors to look at other options in the landscaping that help, I think, accomplish what is being discussed and debated here, of ensuring that the neighbors are able to be shielded, I guess, or insulated from line of sight. I know there's some topography issues there that can possibly be addressed with different shrubs and versus trees, and so I just would hate to really take a few steps back and unpack all this and cause this project to kind of move in a different direction. I think we got, as I mentioned before, we've got a willing applicant and some brilliant staff to kind of work on this if it were to move forward as is.
I would just ask, you do realize this is all masonry, like if you're sitting in that retirement home, right, looking out your window, you're looking at a masonry wall and then a big metal storage building, right, above it with no greenery in between, whereas you would be expected if the development standards, what you'd be looking at is a masonry wall that's there and then trees above it, right, where you wouldn't see. That would be the idea behind our development standards is you'd be looking at trees above that masonry wall instead of right now what the best solution is because of the economics of the building. When I hear comments like that of like, oh, the economics prevent it.
You have an applicant who's willing to put trees in the neighboring yard to block.
Can you use your mic?
You have an applicant who's willing to work with staff, work with the neighbor to add trees at his own expense to block the line of sight of the cement or masonry wall, and or add shrubs that I would imagine a landscaping artist or an arborist can at least, it's fast growing and block that metal building. So it seems like that accomplishes the concern. Unless I'm missing something.
I don't think there's space on the property next to it in order to plant anything. That's not what I see. So that's a nice offer, but it's also like we're going to go away from this development standard and basically put a massive eyesore next to it. To me, looking at it, it's like, okay, I don't understand why we have development standards at that point. So when I look at it, I go, these are supposed to protect the the neighbors, right? And in this case, what we've said is some low-lying ground shrubs, right? That's the solution that's been come up with. So I'm having a hard time. I guess that now I'm leaning toward just continuing the project until it works out and comes back.
I guess my kind of appreciate everyone's comments, and I agree with a lot of it. I guess where my challenge comes down is we've, arguably identified kind of like what appears to maybe be the issue, or at least maybe the bigger issue, and it's the one thing that we don't seem to be able to like resolve. It's most maybe arguably for the residents, maybe the most important of all of those kind of pieces, and it's the one that's kind of like, well, we'll figure it out later. And I guess kind of just as a procedural process wise, like maybe that that's the part that I struggle with. I actually like the design of the storage facility in the red barn, and I have no doubt that Mr.
I like the front of it.
Yeah.
But I'm not. Yeah, that's not where the residents are going to be looking.
And I have no doubt. I believe that Mr. Petrovich is a very creative and resourceful, builder and developer. But just kind of going back to the process piece, it's like the one issue is the one piece that we're like, well, we'll just figure out that part later. And I guess that's, I honestly haven't made up my mind yet. But that's where I guess I'm kind of like struggling.
Commissioner Borja, anything to weigh in, or should I make a motion?
Thank you for all the thoughts and concerns. I think I do think that we have a willing applicant. I just trying to figure out a good way to meet in the medium and to continue the project, and still be able. I think he's offered a number of different solutions that I'm not. I mean, I'm willing to even just say, okay, yeah, put the cypress trees in there if that's feasible, and hopefully that solves it. I just don't know, Chair, if that kind of solves the issue from the deviation. But I do believe we have a willing applicant to think creatively. But my only concern is effectively if we say, hey, yeah, we're moving the project, but only 2 out of the 3, and then we're kind of punting it to the Board of Supervisors to make that decision. I think we either say yes, however, these are the concerns, and perhaps add a condition for them to work with, or maybe not a condition, but an understanding that they're working with a staff to determine without having to. I guess my concern here is just moving it to a future hearing if that kind of loses steam. It's been a 6-year project, and I guess we have an ability to still be able to perhaps address some of the concerns with additional conditions that the applicant was willing to add for us to consider.
I don't see how we get here with an added condition. What we're being asked is to relax the development standards and to come up with a condition to allow that relaxation but we really don't have the technical knowledge or the ability to do that, and I don't want to try to solve that. I don't think we have the ability to solve that tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and move to continue the item, and I'm open to I think probably indefinite would make the most sense.
Continue for what purpose?
To resolve to have the applicant come back with a solution that doesn't change that doesn't allow that doesn't have the condition, the 3-foot wide planter that provides screening to the applicant per our development standards.
Okay, well, you probably call the applicant back up to find out whether or not that's something they would even consider to eliminate that deviation, if that's even something that it's feasible for their project.
I thought I'd ask that, but yeah, go ahead.
If you want to move the project and eliminate that deviation, I'll figure it out.
I don't know if I can move the project 3 feet because we haven't analyzed that.
Well, it would be up to me to solve that 7-foot planter issue,
So
one way or another.
So are you comfortable with removing that deviation then?
Yes.
Okay.
Assuming the whole building shifts to the east 3 feet, is that what the idea is?
There's many ideas, and we will work on them and hopefully find a species of plant or work something out with the other side. I just saw a picture of the other side of the wall. There is huge shrubberies and trees that are already blocking the visual impact onto my property. There's enormous trees. I just handed it to staff. It's not a blank wall. And like I said, with their property sitting so much lower than ours, their line of sight is going to be to the top half of the second floor, not the whole building. And Commissioner Devlin, I appreciate your comments on architectural design, because that building is, all four sides of that building are going to be good to look at. And this is not a metal building. This is a masonry building. You can't build two-story metal-sided building like that. The barn components might be metal to make the roof red, but I don't build metal buildings. So I'd be happy to accept that deviation being removed and give me time between now and December 10th. And the reason I'm concerned about a continuance, so you know, not only is time, money, and
Yeah, that's where I started too, for sure. I want to figure out a way to move it forward.
Supervisor Frost has been fostering this project and been aware of it and working with the community for 6 years. And her last hearing is December 10th, which is when we're scheduled to be in front of her and the rest of the Board of Supervisors. And to throw the former mayor a Folsom, into the deep end of the pool when all of this has been tracked and so on and so forth. I throw myself at the mercy of the court, if you will, to somehow take away a deviation, leave it to staff and me to work out solutions. We're all willing and bright people to do it. I would like to get a line of sight analysis done from the senior facility and get a mock-up with an architect and see what we're really looking at here based upon because we're still going to lower our site further. I'd hate to see this thing get tripped up, and I'm sure I know I can work this out. I got to admit that because DRAC didn't have a problem with this, I'm not saying you're not entitled by any means, but
To be fair, I don't think DRAC's ever rejected anything in their life.
It
or
took
at
me
least by the
14
time it gets
months to
here.
get them to approve
By the
one
time it gets
project I can tell you about.
I can see line of sight from Hickory straight over to this building, right? And I can see, this. I can see the windows there. So I do think line of sight's a great idea.
Yeah.
And sorting that out.
I'll sort it out if you would be so kind as to move me forward without that deviation, and I will fix it. It's not the biggest challenge I've faced.
Okay, and I don't have any issue, I'll just say it for the record, as far as moving the project 3 feet closer to Hickory Avenue. I think that is a less important deviation to me. I get there are good reasons for setback from a road, but on this project, I don't think it makes too much of a difference aesthetically, or from obviously the safety impacts would have to be analyzed separately, but I don't see a big issue with that moving 3 feet. So I look to staff a little bit. Do we need to give some leeway in the other conditions of the special development permit in order to do that?
Yes, so I do just kind of generally I'm looking at Exhibit B, which has the cross sections. You would be moving the building into that frontage landscape planner along Hickory, which may affect the types of trees that can be planted or if trees can be planted in there at all. So you are, I think, regardless of if we eliminate this deviation from the west property line, you're looking at either an additional landscape deviation along Hickory Avenue or greater deviations to what they're currently proposing.
May I interject a solution? I think could solve this, and I'm willing to accept this. If you look at the site plan right here, you see these parking spaces are 90 degrees. If we only had a gate here to keep traffic from cutting through, and I angled those parking spaces, I probably gained 3 feet. And then the cars would come through here, and then we wouldn't have a gate here, and then they can exit out that way. But they couldn't make their way out past the gate that you got to have the code with. That's a trick we use in shopping center parking lots when we want to create more room, because a drive aisle doesn't have to be as wide when you have angled parking.
I think there's a lot of different solutions that could work here. It's just put us in between a rock and a hard place, which is why I constantly, every single meeting, talk about special development permits and the place that it puts us in. Because if we don't like one, we're really way down the road when it comes to that. So
I think it's fair to not give me that deviation and let me make the changes and convince staff and the Board of Supervisors that it works. I'm not trying to circumvent this body, but I can do that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll say that addresses my earlier comment that I didn't know if the applicant would characterize that as an approval or a denial, but now it sounds like he's saying it's feasible. So you could couch your motion as a recommendation for approval, except for that one deviation. And then with the additional instruction to the board that this is why we want an extra 3 feet along the west side to plant trees or whatever it is.
So that's the front yard on the east. Sorry, I get confused between this front yard and side yard when we are on a corner. So the front yard easement right now is 27.2. Would you like us to modify that as a potential, or would just leave it alone?
I think you can leave it because any changes that they make will need to adjust the details of the request accordingly.
Understood. I'm happy to move staff recommendation with the removal of the landscape planter deviation on the special development permit. Do I have a second?
Go ahead and second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Commissioners Borja,
Yes.
Conklin,
Yes.
Devlin,
Yes.
and Rathel.
Yes.
And the motion carries
Thank you
as
so
amended.
much.
Mhm.
We'll move on to item number 4, which is the planning director's report.
Not a lot to report tonight. I will say, just very briefly, a number of staff attended the the California chapter of the APA Association annual conference in Riverside this year. Just got back last week. There is a tremendous amount of legislation that we're unpacking. And so we'll be working on some zoning code amendments and a lot of other things to deal with all that legislation that was passed and signed into law. And that's it for my report tonight.
Thank you. Ms.
Director Smith, just a quick question. Do we have a new infill coordinator yet?
No, we do not.
Okay. Well, hopefully soon. Crossing my fingers and toes.
Not to mention the principal planner in current planning.
That too. More fingers and toes.
Miscellaneous scheduling items. Anyone going to miss future meetings or staff? Any comments on scheduling?
I would note the October 21st hearing is likely to be a great opportunity for robust public engagement.
Thank you. All right. And public comment?
No further public comment.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and adjourn at 7:29. Have a good night, everybody.